morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Georgia Sanders. I am the Networks and Engagement Officer at the Vision for Volunteering, and we are really excited to be sharing this with you today, sharing our Power Conference, and talking to you about all things power. So I'm going to give a little bit of an intro, talk you through what the Vision for Volunteering is. I'll whistle start past that because I know that a lot of you will already be very aware of what the Vision for Volunteering is, and talk to you about our power theme. And then we've got some really great guest speakers coming along this morning as well. So thank you again for coming, and let's start. So Stephen, if I could have my slides, please, that'd be fab. Thank you. Okay, so already introduced myself, so it'd be really great to hear from you guys. So if you could pop your name into the chat, introduce yourself, let me know what inspired you to attend today, introduce yourself to others, get to know the other people that are here. That would be fab. My name is Georgia Sanders, and I am inspired by the Vision for Volunteering and volunteering in general, and I'm really excited for the rest of the morning. So here's a little overview of what's coming up. So I'm going to give you a quick intro, a quick welcome, and talk you through housekeeping stuff. And then we're going to have a little bit of a look at the Vision for Volunteering power theme itself, what that means to us, why we think power is important, how we came to the conclusion that that power theme is important. And then I'm going to hand over to Nicola Lake from Resourcevol, who is going to be giving a really interesting talk and a workshop on volunteer leaders. Then we'll have a quick comfort break for you to grab a drink, go to the loo, do whatever it is that you need to do, stretch your legs, stretch your eyeballs. And then we'll come back and we'll hear from some of the iWill ambassadors who will be talking about the power of youth social action, which I'm really looking forward to as well. There will be time for questions for both of these presentations, so do drop your questions in the chat as the presentations go, and then we'll revisit the questions at the end. We do have our fantastic engineer Stephen on hand, who will hand all of those questions over to us, so don't worry about them getting lost. And then we'll take any other questions at the end. We'll have a quick close, a quick recap of what we've learned, and then you can carry on with the rest of your Wednesday. So once again, thank you for being here. I'm really, really happy that you've all come along this morning. So before we start, I just wanted to get a bit of an idea of how well you understand the Vision for Volunteering. So some of you may be here and you've been to all of our events before and you're really well versed and you're just really keen to learn more. And some of you might have only just heard of us, or you may have been recommended by a colleague to come along and you have no idea what the Vision for Volunteering is and you'd really like to learn more. So just to let you know, all of these polls are anonymous. We're not harvesting information with these. We want to get a better idea of, well, there'll be more Slido polls to come, and we want to get a better idea of how well you know the vision, how well you think you're performing in the area of power, and what thoughts you have on where things could improve or what's going really well. So just to start, I'd like to get an idea on a scale of 1 to 10. How well do you understand the Vision for Volunteering? And also that will give me an idea of how deep to go into it when I go through the quick update in a moment. So I'll just give you a few seconds to answer that poll. And then if we've got the answers, Stephen, please, whenever you're ready. So we've got some answers coming in through the chat. So we've got some 3s, lots of 3s, some 2s, a couple of 4s. That's fantastic. Okay. So lots of 1s, lots of 3s, lots of 2s. So a bit of a mix, actually, a bit of a mixed response on this question. So I'll give you a quick whistle stop tour. I will let you know as well, there are some intro to the vision sessions coming up. So if this isn't enough information for you, you want to learn a bit more about the background of the Vision for Volunteering, those are completely free. Do feel free to sign up on our Eventbrite. There are more going up all the time. But I'll give you a quick whistle stop of what the Vision for Volunteering is. So the vision is a 10-year collaborative project designed to create a better future for volunteering. It is run by 7 partner organisations. So we are a collaborative partnership project with NCVO, AVM, NAVCA, Volunteering Matters, Sport England, DCMS and the Muslim Charities Forum, who are our most recent partner, who joined us in July, I believe, as the 7th partner for the Vision for Volunteering. So these are the organisations and the groups that make up the partnership of the vision. We are the ones who do the research and the planning and identify how we can improve volunteering across the board, and also what areas of volunteering need improving and what the best strategy is to approach that. So like I said, it's a 10-year project. We are about a year and a half into that. So we're really at the beginning of the journey. We're still doing a lot of data gathering, a lot of research, and a lot of discussions and conversations and hearing from you guys. The plan is that by 2032, we will have made a significant impact on the volunteering space. So why is the vision needed? So we've spoken to, I've skipped ahead there. We've spoken to over 350 people from over 300 different organisations. That's quite an old figure, actually. So we've probably spoken to a lot more than that by now. In late 2021, a steering group carried out 14 workshops, numerous written interviews and written submissions from volunteers, volunteer-involving organisations and other stakeholders. And the vision for volunteering launched in earnest in May 2021. And the vision is needed because volunteering currently, as I'm sure you all know, isn't accessible or equally enjoyable for everyone who participates in it. We saw massive changes throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, and not all of these changes were positive, and not all of these changes were permanent. We're also seeing changing pattern in who is volunteering and how they're volunteering and what activities they're doing and what roles they're choosing to take on. So through all of this research, as the partnership and the steering group that we put together identified, we found these 5 key themes that came up time and time and time again, and areas that are both crucial in volunteering and areas that we think could do with significant improvement in volunteering. So those areas are awareness and appreciation, power, equity and inclusion, collaboration, and experimentation. And those are the basis of the conferences that we're running over the next couple of months. So we've had our awareness and appreciation conference in January. So thank you to all who came to that. Today, obviously, we're focusing on that power theme, and we'll go more into that in a moment. And we're also looking at equity and inclusion, collaboration and experimentation, and we have events for all of those coming up over the next few weeks too. And we're really looking at what volunteers need to do now and during the next 10 years in order to make their most effective contributions. So we're looking at how we capture new practices and new technologies and harness those to create a better future for volunteering. So how can we let go of the practices that no longer serve us and tackle some of those long-standing inequalities in volunteering? So power. What do we mean when we say power? It's a very broad term. It's a very broad term on purpose because we really want to know how these themes resonate with you personally and with your organization, and they'll mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But in general, we want a future where the power of volunteers and communities is not only recognized, but it's given the support and the foundation that it needs. Every day, volunteers make things happen. People come together in movements of support, in action, in solidarity, and in protest. And many organizations and charities and institutions were initially formed by volunteers. We believe that to create thriving communities, power must be devolved from state to communities, from organizations to individuals. And the vision for volunteering is trying to create a future where people who volunteer and who want the opportunity can shape volunteering, can share that power, can lead that change, and be given those opportunities. So we want volunteers and the communities they serve to have power. Volunteers are leaders. So by 2032, at the end of this 10-year project, this is really what we want power to look like in volunteering. We want everyone to be able to engage with their community and build a future that they want. Decisions should be made by those who are best placed to make them and not by a hierarchy necessarily. We want people working alongside volunteers to be accountable to communities as well as governments and funders. We recognise who is missing in our volunteering spaces, and we want to have the confidence to rectify that and bring in those people who are missing. So how would this feel for volunteers by 2032? Well, we've spoken to numerous volunteers and people involved in volunteering over the last few years, and these are some of the quotes that have really stuck out to us from our research. So volunteers would like to have the power to shape their community and to influence what's happening around them. And this one really resonates with me. Things are done with, not to me. I'm listened to, respected, and my views are properly taken into account. So just a quick whistle-stop tour of the vision and what we really mean by that power theme. But I now want to hear from you guys. So over to you. There is a Slido poll on the page, and we will be looking at a few questions. And again, these are all anonymous. It's just to give us an idea of how everyone thinks they're doing in the room. We will save the answers, but obviously not against anybody's names. But we would like to know how you rate your organisation for power in volunteering, how your volunteers would rate you for power in volunteering. And then there's just a little word cloud we're going to make towards the end as well, what you're doing well and what needs improvement. And all of these, again, around that power theme. So how are you empowering volunteers? How could you empower volunteers? Where are you maybe struggling? Where have you got ideas, but you don't really know where to start? Anything like that would be really, really interesting for us, just to sort of to see, and obviously have those discussions in the chat as well, if the mood takes you. So I'm just going to pass over to the Slido poll now, and hopefully we'll get some responses coming through. So there should be a button on your screen that will enable you to join in with those. So as soon as we get some responses, we'll be able to share those with you. So I'm just waiting for you guys to have a look at those Slido polls. Okay, so we've got some responses coming through from you guys. So about half of you would say you're about a 3. Few of you think you're a 5, which I'm really keen to hear more about that. Tell me, tell us in the comments in the chat what you think you're doing really, really well. Nobody's at a 1, which is fantastic to hear. A lot of 2s, lots and lots of 3s. Fabulous. Yeah, any thoughts in the chat on sort of why you've put this score would be really interesting as well. Great. If we could have the next answer, please, Stephen. Fabulous. How would your volunteers rate you? It's interesting that this is a different response. So we've got a lot of 4s, sort of quite evenly split between 2, 3, and 4. But it looks like a lot of you think that your volunteers would rate you higher than you would rate yourselves, which is really interesting. If anyone has any more clarity on that and they want to add in the chat, then do feel free. But that's really, really interesting. Okay, if we could move on to the word clouds now, please, Stephen. Thank you. Okay, so volunteers are a big one. That makes sense. Inclusion seems to be very important. Volunteers lead at every level. That's a really important one. Autonomy and scheduling, I think, is often overlooked. Communication, incredibly valuable. Okay, so it's fantastic to hear that you guys are doing well in all these areas. I just see the word slowly coming up, and that does resonate, I think. Fantastic. And then if we could move on to the final question, please. Wow. Okay, consistency of power sharing. So consistency seems to be a big one for you guys. People would like to give volunteers more autonomy. We'd like to see more consistency, a more truly volunteer-led activity, designing roles with volunteers. We've got the word women coming up there, so there seems to be a bit of a gender equality issue. Give volunteers more autonomy. Yeah, so it's just that power sharing, I think, is coming up time and time again. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for participating in those. That's really helpful for us. If we could go back to the slides, please. Great, thank you. Okay, so I seem to have sped right ahead, Nicola. So if you're ready, just give me a shout. And if not, then I think there are a few people in the chat who wanted us to go over the power information one more time. I think there was a bit of a glitch with the tech, but Nicola, if you're ready, then please do go ahead. And if not, then I can go back and do the power info again. Okay, great. So I'd like to hand over to Nicola Lake from Resourcevol, and please give her a very warm welcome as she talks through her volunteer leaders workshop. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think that you can see me now, and I hope you can hear me as well. So I have a cat on my lap, just to let everyone know. So if you see her standing up, that's what it is. It's just easier to keep her like this because otherwise she will make lots of noise. So yeah, I'm just going to do a quick introduction. So I have experience volunteering with lots of different organizations, and I started actually working in the nonprofit sector, I think about 8 years ago. And I've had roles in volunteer coordination and volunteer management with a few different nonprofit organizations. And now I specialize in helping nonprofits with volunteer recruitment, induction and training via my own company, which Georgia mentioned earlier, which is called Resourcevol. And that includes bespoke resources and consultancy services as well. But I'm also a Vision for Volunteering champion. And as part of that role, that's why I'm here today. And I'm going to talk about volunteer leaders in line with the theme of power. So if I could have the first slide up, that would be great. Brilliant. So yeah, more specifically, I'm here to talk about how existing volunteer leaders can grow their leader team. But if you aren't a volunteer leader, don't worry. Most of what we're going to look at today is also relevant for staff within nonprofit organizations who are looking maybe to recruit volunteer leaders, and also really just for anyone who wants to learn more about being a volunteer leader. So I hope that there is something for everyone. So I just tried to move my slide along, but it doesn't seem to be working. Oh, there you go. Okay. So we're going to kick off with the aim and objectives, just so we know what it is that we're trying to achieve and what we're going to look at today. So the aim of this presentation is to give existing volunteer leaders the knowledge and confidence needed to successfully grow their volunteer leader team. And to achieve this aim, we have 6 objectives. The first one is to understand what we mean when we talk about a volunteer leader. Then to know what skills and personal qualities make good volunteer leaders and how to approach volunteers about becoming a leader. To know what special events and shadowing opportunities we can organise to allow for a gradual introduction to leader roles. To understand the influence that existing leaders can have on whether a volunteer becomes a leader or not. And finally, to learn how to identify and remove different barriers to becoming a leader. So at this point, it's worth noting that the focus throughout this presentation is going to be on growing your volunteer leader team from within your organization's existing volunteer pool. So existing volunteers are already committed to your organization. They understand how things work, and they have that experience that's necessary to step up into a leader role. So it's usually just generally more effective to focus on existing volunteers rather than approaching people outside your organization. And as you can see from the objectives, we're actually going to cover quite a lot during this presentation, including a few activities, which will hopefully keep everyone engaged and awake. It should take about an hour, and we don't have any breaks scheduled, but I think there's a break pretty soon afterwards. That's what Georgia said. If you have any burning questions as we're going along, please ask. Popping them in the chat is the best way to do that. But just so you know, there's also some dedicated time for questions at the end. And if your question can wait, that will help us to stick to time as well. And one more thing I probably should mention is I'm just coming to the end of a cold thing, so I might have to occasionally stop and mute myself to cough and drink some water. So apologies for that. So let's start off by exploring what we mean by a volunteer leader. The definition that should be up on the screen now is actually borrowed from the Vision for Volunteering description of the power theme. So volunteer leaders are people who want the opportunity to shape their volunteering, share power, and lead change. Many nonprofit organizations will have volunteer leader roles, and this could be in a formal capacity. So you might actually have a formal role description and clear leader role titles within your organization, or it could also be informal. So this might be where some volunteers have just naturally become leaders because of the length of time that they've been with your organization, or maybe the level of experience that they came into their volunteer role with, and so on. Leader roles are, of course, they're going to be different between different organizations, but in my experience, they do tend to have some key elements in common which set them apart from a standard volunteer role. And I've got a few examples here. So the first one is a time commitment. So this could be a request from your organization for volunteers to come along to sessions every week or every month instead of coming along on more of an ad hoc basis. Or it could be that you ask them to commit to a role for a minimum time period. So for example, 6 months or a year. Extra responsibilities. These can look very different depending on different organizations, but it could be things like prepping and planning volunteer sessions, ordering equipment, submitting reports, and things like that. Leading other volunteers. This includes maybe delegating tasks, listening to feedback from other volunteers, and providing support. It could even be helping to induct or train new volunteers. Representing the organization, so at internal or external events or in the media. So maybe a volunteer goes along and does a radio interview, for instance. And finally, attending meetings, usually outside of normal volunteer sessions. This could be to discuss any issues and hopefully resolve them, and maybe even actually have a say in how the organization is run. So those are the 5 kind of different elements there. And I would say if a volunteer role includes 2 or more of those elements, then it's really safe to say that it's a leader role. It could be a leader role even with just one of these elements, but I would say it's safe to say it's a leader role if it has 2 or more. But of course, this isn't an exhaustive list. It's just 5 things up here on a slide. And for sure, there are other things that make up a volunteer leader. And that's why we're going to do a quick activity now. So your understanding of what a volunteer leader is could be quite different depending on how things are done in your organization or based on your personal experience of volunteering. So it would be really great to get your input. We have an interactive whiteboard, which hopefully we can post a link to in the chat. I think that you need to have a Google account to access this. It's called a Jamboard. But if you don't have a Google account, you can write in the chat box instead, and then we'll kind of manually take those contributions and put them on the Jamboard before we download it and share it after the session. But otherwise, if you can access the interactive whiteboard, that would be great. And the instructions for this activity are to use that whiteboard space to note down your thoughts on what a volunteer leader is to you. You can expand on the general elements that we've just looked at, or you can suggest something completely new. It might help to think about existing leader roles within your organization, whether those are formal or informal, or your personal experience of leader roles. Basically, you'll have just a few minutes, I think 3 minutes max, to do that, and then we'll carry on with the presentation. Okay, so that's about 3 minutes there, and I can see that there's lots of contributions in there, which is amazing. And there's lots of stuff in there that's kind of fairly general and can easily be applied to roles and like across organizations. But there's also some stuff in there that's really specific as well, which is good because we also need to think about specifically our organization and what a leader is to us, because that does influence other things as well. So yeah, all of them are valid, and I hope give us a much more kind of comprehensive idea and understanding of what a volunteer leader is. And like I said, the notes will be shared with everyone after the session as well, because it's just a good like reference point to kind of remind ourselves every now and then what volunteer leaders are. So right now, we're going to move on from looking at what a volunteer leader is to what it takes to be effective as a leader, which usually means having certain skills and personal qualities. So hopefully you can see on the slide here skills. So we have communication, teamwork, problem solving, leadership, and organization. These are all really useful general skills for volunteer leaders. So when you're trying to grow your volunteer leader team, it's worth keeping an eye out for volunteers who display some of these skills or maybe all of these skills during regular volunteer sessions. And then with personal qualities, we have being dependable, positive, resourceful, approachable, and calm under pressure. These all tend to be really useful personal qualities for volunteer leaders. And just like with the skills, it's worth keeping an eye out for volunteers who display some or all of these personal qualities during volunteer sessions. Obviously, volunteers don't have to have these skills and personal qualities to become leaders. They can develop them by taking on the leader role. And you can actually even encourage people to take on a leader role by highlighting how it can help them to develop desirable skills and personal qualities. But this is a more kind of challenging approach, and they will need extra support in the beginning if you do this, and you'll need to kind of weigh up the benefits with the potential negative impact on other volunteers and on the service you're delivering if you choose that as an approach. And on this slide, you can see some examples of other skills and personal qualities that would be an advantage for specific kinds of leader roles. So I've just chosen some examples on the slide there. It might resonate with your organization or it might not. And your organization might have already identified some examples like these for your specific leader roles. If not, you might find it useful to kind of go away on this event and think about what skills and personal qualities you personally tend to rely on as a leader, or maybe ask other existing leaders what they think is important, so that you can use those alongside the more general ones that we've just looked at to help you identify volunteers who would do particularly well as leaders within your organization. Then once you've identified a volunteer, the next step is to actually approach them about becoming a leader. Oh, I think I skipped too far ahead there. So yeah, on this slide, you can see the word selling. It might seem a bit out of place in the context of nonprofits and volunteering, but it's actually something that we all do every day in all kinds of situations. And most of the time, we don't even realize that we're doing it because, for example, if you tell a friend or family member about a book or a film that you saw recently, or your new favorite cafe, like place to eat or drink or something like that, all of those are examples of selling, but we just don't think of it like that because we genuinely believe in what we're talking about, and we hope that someone that we know or care about might also get some enjoyment from that, so it doesn't feel like selling. When you're selling a volunteer leader role, we have 5 top tips for you to remember. So the first one is basically there's always going to be positives and negatives to every situation. So when you're talking about being a volunteer leader, just remember to focus on the positives. You wouldn't be a leader if you didn't think the role was important, you didn't think the role was rewarding. So let your passion for it and your enthusiasm shine through. It's actually really catching. So the person that you're talking to will kind of start to feel that passion and enthusiasm as well. Don't say that you love everything about the role unless you really do. It's unlikely, but some people, I guess, could. Don't pretend that it's easy if it isn't easy. Setting realistic expectations early on is important, and you can be honest about the challenging parts of the role without being negative. Might take a bit of practice, but you can. Make it clear what the leader role involves, including what the induction process and training process is like, and make sure that you have answers ready for any questions that they might ask, and know where to send volunteers if they need more information. And then finally, you can actually communicate more effectively if you understand about different social styles and you learn how to change your behavior to match the person that you're communicating with. And this is actually what we're going to look at now. You may have heard about social styles before or something similar. There are quite a lot of slightly different theories about communication styles and personality types and so on. But today we're going to learn about social style theory, which is something that's based on the work of two psychologists, Roger Reed and David Merrill. So they suggested that we all have a set of natural behaviors and a preferred style of communication, which essentially just means that we're all more comfortable interacting with people who have a social style that's similar to our own. So as far as volunteer leaders go, it means that we can communicate more effectively with a volunteer about becoming a leader if we understand about different social styles and we learn how to adapt our style to suit the volunteers. So what actually are the different social styles? We're going to find out by looking at the social style model, which uses 2 dimensions to identify 4 different social styles. And I'm just going to have a sip of water. Excuse me. So the first dimension is assertiveness. This is whether we tend to ask or tend to tell, and it's represented on the slide by the horizontal line. Then the second dimension is responsiveness, and this is whether we control our emotions or outwardly display them, represented here by the vertical line. And then in the spaces created where like the 2 dimensions cross over, or the 2 lines cross over, we can see each of the 4 different social styles, and they're represented on the slide by different shapes. So on the left, we can see that stars and circles both tend to ask, but stars control their emotions and circles display their emotions. And then on the right, we can see that diamonds and triangles both tend to tell, but diamonds control their emotions and triangles display their emotions. It's really important to note, though, that social styles are based on the perception of a person's behavior by others, and they don't necessarily relate to personality. There are some theories out there which do kind of speak about personality, but this isn't one of them. Also, it's really unlikely that anyone's going to fit perfectly into one social style or another, but people do tend to kind of operate within one overriding social style. With that in mind, we're going to take a quick look at the different characteristics of each social style and how we can adapt our approach for the best result. And when I say quick, I mean it. We're really not going to spend very long on each of these social styles right now, because there's an activity coming up where you'll have time to look at them in detail on your own. So this is just going to be a really quick overview. So don't worry when I kind of speed through the slides. I'm doing it on purpose. So starting with stars, who tend towards asking and control their emotions. We have the 10 characteristics on the left, and then on the right, we have 3 tips for effective communication. So if you identify from this list of characteristics that you're communicating with a star, the best approach is to present hard facts and figures, expect questions, and be patient. Moving on to circles, who also tend towards asking, but they display their emotions. Again, we have these 10 characteristics on the left and the 3 tips for effective communication on the right. So if you identify that you're communicating with a circle, the best approach is to focus on building a relationship, capture their imagination, and be decisive. Now, diamonds, who tend towards telling and control their emotions. If you identify that you're communicating with a diamond, the best approach is to provide evidence and have answers ready, highlight the benefits, and be concise. And finally, triangles, who also tend towards telling but display their emotions. So if you're communicating with a triangle, the best approach is to connect with emotion, emphasize personal experience, and give them space. So as promised, now we're going to do an activity. So you can put this new knowledge, or maybe it's existing knowledge, that's okay too, about social styles into practice. This is an independent activity, so you can make your own notes in whatever way is most comfortable for you. There is a PDF file which you should be able to download from Google Drive, and the link to that should be in the chat, which contains the slides that you need for reference. So it's those slides that we just skipped over really quickly with all that information about the characteristics and the tips for communication. In that PDF, you can freely kind of read that and go backwards and forwards. If you have trouble reading the PDF file, we'll also put a link to an audio recording of the main bulk of the text. So basically, if it's difficult for you to read, if you prefer an audio format, then there's an MP3 for you to listen to, which I think is 3 to 4 minutes long. But if you don't need an audio format, please just ignore that. You can just use the PDF. You don't need both. Hope that makes sense. So while you're kind of finding and opening up the reference material, I'm going to run through the instructions for the activity. So the first thing you need to do is identify your own social style. Then you need to choose a social style that's different from your own, and write 3 to 5 bullet points selling a volunteer leader role to the social style that you've chosen. And it works best when you're thinking about a specific role that you know well. So whether that's within your organization or maybe a volunteer role that you have taken on yourself, something like that. And then make sure that you use the tips that are provided for effective communication with the different social styles. And also remember the general tips for selling a leader role, which are also included in the reference material. And then while you're doing the activity as well, think about if you'd be willing to kind of practice your sales pitch when you come back, because it would be great to hear 1 or 2 examples, especially because this is an independent activity and we don't have kind of notes to share with anyone afterwards. So yeah, I'll keep this slide up with the instructions, and I believe that I've also kind of duplicated these instructions in the PDF so that you can look at everything in one place. And I'll also try and keep an eye on the chat in case anyone has any questions. And you have 10 minutes for this, and then we'll all kind of come back together again. Okay, so that was 10 minutes. I hope it was enough time. I know there was quite a lot to do there in that activity. So as I mentioned when I was kind of explaining it, because it's an independent one, we don't kind of have any notes to share after the session. If you're willing to share your bullet points that you've written in the chat, that would be great. And then people can kind of, hopefully, as we're going along, if you have time and kind of brain space, if you are the social style that that person has chosen, maybe you can give them some feedback and kind of say, yeah, this would work on me. This is quite convincing. And if anything can be improved, and also kind of have a think about the other top tips for selling. So are they focusing on the positives and showing passion and enthusiasm? Are they being genuine and honest? Are they making sure that everything is clear when they're trying to sell the leader role? So yeah, if you want to kind of do that in the chat, that would be great. And maybe we can kind of pull some of those out as well and kind of put them together as some little case studies afterwards. I'll have a chat with Georgia and see if that's possible. So yeah, otherwise you might also find it useful to kind of repeat this activity after the session. So for each of the leader roles that you have and each of the social styles, so you kind of build up like a folder of quick reference examples that you can use within your organization. That might be a useful activity for you to do. For now, we're actually going to move on to look at events, which are another really important part of encouraging volunteers to become leaders. So here we're going to take a look at 3 examples of events that you could organize for volunteers outside of normal volunteer sessions. The first example is a volunteer social. So if you hold regular social events for volunteers, it can help them to feel more like part of a team. And as a leader, you can also use those social events as an opportunity to spot the skills and personal qualities that we mentioned earlier, and also to identify different social styles. The kind of activity that you organize will very much depend on your organization's policy and the budget, but social events can be online, so it's important to remember that, and they can be organized at very little cost if needed as well. The second event example is a volunteer leader meetup. This is a more kind of formal opportunity for volunteers to meet up with some leaders outside of a normal volunteer session and learn about the leader roles that you have within your organization. The activity in this case should be something which makes conversation easy, so try and avoid anything that's too loud or overstimulating. All volunteers should be invited to these events, of course, but if you want to encourage certain volunteers to attend, then a personal invitation is a really good idea because it shows that you've noticed someone and you value their contribution. I know that I'm much more likely to attend an event if someone personally invites me rather than me just getting a blanket email invitation, for instance. And the third and final example is an out-of-hours taster or training session. This type of event is actually aimed at volunteers who are already interested in becoming leaders. And it's supposed to be a kind of opportunity for them to learn what leaders do without kind of the pressure or distraction of a normal volunteer session, because it's kind of out of hours. And the idea is for volunteer leaders who are running this kind of event to demonstrate in a really practical manner everything that's required to carry out the leader role. So a good way to do this is kind of to run like a practice session or a dress rehearsal type thing. Ideally, you would have more than one volunteer attend this kind of event because it can be quite time consuming to organize and run for a start. And then also having a group context means that there's kind of less focus and less pressure on an individual person, and the experience is kind of less intimidating because it can be almost information overload. And if you're then also the only person there, that's even worse. So those are just a few examples of events that can help persuade volunteers to become leaders. And you might come up with some other ideas. You might already do some other kinds of events in your organization. And if so, please do share them in the chat. And in the meantime, we're going to move on to look at shadowing. This is another great way to encourage volunteers to become leaders. And shadowing is basically when a volunteer observes an experienced leader to learn how to carry out the role. For some volunteers, becoming a leader can seem like a really big step. So shadowing is actually an important part of offering a gradual progression into a leader role. So yeah, for sure, I would say that a lot of people are suitable to being a leader, but they just don't want to have this big step up from the role that they're comfortable doing to this leadership role. So shadowing is a really kind of good way to bridge the gap. Shadowing is also important because if a volunteer shadows, they're more likely to become a leader, as I've just said. They're more likely to enjoy being a leader, and they're also more likely to stay in the role for a longer period. There are a few different kinds of shadowing that you can offer to your volunteers. Full shadowing is probably the most common one, the most kind of well-known shadowing. And this is where you make arrangements for a volunteer to accompany a leader throughout a volunteer session so they can watch and develop an understanding of the responsibilities and the different requirements of the role. And the leader demonstrates all aspects of the role. And depending on how your sessions work and how busy the leader is, they might also kind of take some time to explain why certain tasks are required and how they should be carried out, as well as demonstrating it. Bite-sized shadowing is quite different. It's much more informal and flexible. So leaders can show any volunteers who are keen how to carry out maybe 1 or 2 specific leader tasks during a volunteer session. So in this way, volunteers can learn about the leader role in manageable bite-sized parts. And there's no planning or pressure with this. It's a kind of shadowing that can be done spontaneously. So it's really just if the leader has capacity and if the volunteer is interested, then you can do it. And then the final example is reverse shadowing. And this is for volunteers who've already done another form of shadowing and they feel ready to kind of take that next step towards becoming a leader. So the idea here is that they try leading their first session with an experienced leader observing them, hence reverse shadowing. And the experienced leader is there to kind of answer questions and provide support if needed. And they should also give the volunteers some feedback after the session, so highlighting what went well and anything that can be improved. Those are just a few quick examples of types of shadowing you could offer to volunteers. There are other types out there, and maybe in your organization you do different kinds of shadowing already. But it actually doesn't matter how much shadowing you offer to volunteers if you aren't conscious of the influence that you have as an existing volunteer leader on potential new leaders. So the way that you behave as a leader, and especially the way that you interact with volunteers, can have a really big impact on whether they decide to become leaders or not. So it's important to be mindful of that. And just remembering a few simple do's and don'ts can help make sure that your influence is positive rather than negative. Excuse me. So on this slide here, it's quite a busy slide. We have some do's on the left and some don'ts on the right. And you're going to get a copy of these after the session. They're fairly straightforward and they also each have their own notes with them. So I'm not going to spend time going through each one, but we're just going to look at a couple together to make sure that it all makes sense, that you get the idea. Don't be cliquey. It's really great to have a team where everyone knows each other and everyone gets on really well. And this does often happen in organizations where the same volunteers go along to every session or nearly every session, but it can also be really excluding. So I know that I've been in situations before where people are talking about something or laughing at something that I just don't get what's going on. And it doesn't feel very nice. Even if they're not doing it deliberately, it's just a really quick way to make someone feel excluded and maybe even intimidated, which is obviously quite a big disadvantage when you're trying to recruit more leaders. And this actually relates to being welcoming, which is at the top of the list of do's. So being welcoming is something that might seem quite obvious, but when we're busy or stressed, we're maybe not as welcoming or as friendly as we think we are or as we should be. So it's something simple that's good to kind of check and prioritize, because if volunteers don't feel welcome in a standard role, they're not going to feel welcome taking on a leadership role. A good way to prioritize being welcoming is to make sure that you have a volunteer briefing at the beginning of each session. So you might not call it a briefing, you might call it something else, but basically where you take some time to explain how things work and delegate tasks. Also use that time to make sure you're saying a proper hello, you're doing introductions, you're thanking everyone for being there, and so on. It really doesn't take much time, but it can make a huge difference. So yeah, those were just a couple of examples from these do's and don'ts, and you can look at the rest at your own pace after the session. But for now, we're going to move on to our final topic, which is barriers. There can be all sorts of different barriers to becoming a leader, especially across different organizations. And it can help to make things more manageable by dividing barriers into 2 types. So on this slide, hopefully you can see that we have perceived barriers on the left. These are the kind of barriers that can usually be removed really quickly and easily just by making sure that volunteers have the right information about existing policies and processes within your organization. So for example, volunteers might think they need to devote more time to being a leader than is actually necessary. So making sure they have a clear understanding of your organization's recommended time commitment for the leader role can help to overcome that barrier really easily. And then we have actual barriers on the right, and these can be a bit more challenging to address. So with these, your organization is probably going to have to consider individual needs and circumstances and try to find a solution that works for everyone. And this could involve some research, maybe some creative thinking, probably some compromise as well. So an example here is it is possible that some volunteers, they really don't have enough time to be a leader according to what your organization has put as the recommended time commitment. But it is likely that your organization can be quite flexible in circumstances like these, especially if they're very much in need of more leaders. So someone who's able to lead once a month instead of once a week is still better than having no one, especially if it means that your sessions might have to be cancelled otherwise. Yeah, so those are kind of the two different types of barriers. And with our final objective, barriers, we also have one final activity. I hope that you're not sick of activities already. This one is to help kind of get you more familiar with this way of thinking about and identifying barriers so that hopefully you feel more confident about applying it within your organization in the future. And this time it's going to be a group activity. So you'll be in small groups in breakout rooms, I think around 6 people per group, but it depends how many people total we have here today. And what you need to do is choose a scribe or a note taker for your breakout room. So we'll be using an interactive whiteboard again, but this time it's a space for taking notes on what you discuss in your groups. So choose someone who's happy to summarize what you talk about. And then you need to come up with at least one example of each barrier type. So one perceived barrier and one actual barrier, thinking about things that could prevent someone from becoming a volunteer leader. If you have time, please go ahead and think of more than one example for each barrier type. That would be great. But one of each is kind of the main goal. You can use the bullet points that I've provided as a starting point. They're up on the slide there, or you can go with something completely different. And your examples can be generic, or they can be specific to a particular organization or a particular volunteer leader role. That's completely up to you within your groups. And then the third thing you need to do in your groups is discuss and agree what action could be taken to remove or reduce the barriers that you've identified. So I hope that that makes sense. The link to the interactive whiteboard should be in the chat. You can use as many pages as you want up the top. So especially there's probably going to be quite a few different groups and you don't have to all squeeze your notes on the same page. If you go up the top, you can click and create as many pages as you want. You have 5 minutes for this, which isn't a lot of time. So don't take ages choosing your scribe or note taker at the beginning. But 5 minutes should be enough to come up with one example of each and some actions. So yeah, 5 minutes from now. Okay, so I think there was a little bit of confusion there. Apologies about the breakout rooms and maybe the Jamboard as well, because I can only see one group that's put notes in there. So I'm sorry if that activity didn't go quite as planned, but I hope that you were at least able to discuss it in your groups, even if you weren't able to take notes. And I hope that you came up kind of with one example each. I was hoping with the notes on the Jamboard that we could kind of have a reference book of barriers that we could share with everyone afterwards. So if you are able to add some notes to that during the rest of this presentation or maybe afterwards, that would be amazing, because I think it would be really useful for everyone going forward. But also I'm going to make sure that I share some of my examples that I came up with you guys afterwards. So sort of copy some notes from the slides. So yeah, don't worry too much. So yeah, that was that last activity. And to finish up, we're just going to quickly review our aim and objectives to make sure that everyone's happy with what we've done, that hopefully we've done what we set out to do. So the aim of this guide was to give existing volunteer leaders the knowledge and confidence needed to successfully grow their volunteer leader team. And to achieve this aim, we had 6 objectives. So they're all up on the screen now. I hope you'll agree that we've met these objectives, but I'll just give you a moment to read through them. And please let me know if you think that we missed anything or if you're not sure what any of those objectives refer to, because sometimes it isn't super obvious. So yeah, the third one, which says learn how to approach volunteers. This is where we looked at the top tips for selling and the different social styles, for example. One thing I would say is that we really kind of only scratched the surface of barriers because we were focusing on barriers to becoming a leader. So if you want to learn more about barriers to volunteering in general, Resourcevol has a video guide to enabling volunteering, which is available for completely free on YouTube. And I'll make sure that you get a link to that. And there might be some other free resources on that YouTube channel as well that you're interested in. So I'll make sure that you get a link just to the general YouTube channel. And new content is posted on there fairly regularly. So make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss anything. I think actually today I posted the first part of a video about using AI, nonprofits using AI. And you can also let me know if there's any other specific resources or topics that you want to see on there in the future. Yeah, so otherwise, thank you everyone for listening today and for all of your contributions for the tasks. I really hope that you found this presentation useful, and I think that we have a bit of time now to answer some questions. I know that there was one that has already been passed on to me, so I'm just going to see if I can find that again. Okay, so this is a question from Steph. Yeah, I can see that up on the screen now. Thank you very much. So I'm curious about the focus on selecting or appointing leaders versus fostering leadership for all, and how it relates to power sharing, being accountable to communities versus working in hierarchical ways. Steph, that's such an amazing question. Thank you. And there's so much to unpack there as well. Probably the first thing I would say is that all organizations have leadership roles, and as distinct from kind of what you would call a standard role, even if this is done on an informal basis, it is what happens. And I think the reason that it happens is because some people do not want to lead. Some people are perfectly happy just coming in and doing a task and going home again. And I think that you're right. The focus should be on fostering leadership for all. I don't think that we're going to ever kind of move away from these distinct kind of roles, as it were, even if they're informal. But I do think that if you're doing everything in this presentation kind of in conjunction together, then you are working towards kind of fostering leadership for all. So if you're organizing these events to try and encourage kind of volunteers to feel more like part of the team and be more involved, if you're organizing shadowing opportunities to make people feel that actually being a leader is something that isn't such a huge step up, and they have this opportunity to kind of gradually work their way up to that, if you're making sure that you're looking at and addressing all of the barriers that might be stopping people from feeling like they can be a leader, and if you're continually thinking about and adapting your communication style to make sure that you are communicating with your volunteers in the way that makes most sense to them and that will encourage them, then I think that generally speaking, you are going to be fostering leadership for all. I hope that that answers the question. And I don't know if there's any other questions. Okay. Do you have any advice on managing volunteers who are supervising other volunteers? Cautious of some volunteers seeing themselves as managers and being bossy or overbearing to other volunteers. John, that's a really good question as well. So one of the things I would say is that we do kind of need to recognize that there is this distinction. And if you have a volunteer who is supervising other volunteers, the thing I would ideally want in an ideal world is that they do volunteer management training, because they are managing other volunteers, really. Even if you just see it as supervising, if they are the only ones at a session, for instance, it's kind of a volunteer leader and then a group of volunteers, they're responsible for those volunteers. So they need to have kind of the same knowledge as a paid volunteer coordinator or volunteer manager would. And that also will stop them kind of using their position in a weird way. So it will kind of stop them being bossy and stop them being overbearing, because they have a better understanding of how they are supposed to manage volunteers. That might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, especially if it's a kind of, training that your organization might not be able to afford. But even if it's a kind of pared down training as part of when you're bringing someone on to be a leader, this is, a video that they watch about managing volunteers, so that they have that in their mindset that, okay, yeah, this is an approach that I have to have. I think that that's really useful. And I hope that answered that question, even if it wasn't maybe the answer you wanted. Yeah, for sure. Sure. Yeah. I'll share a link to my website. I'll share a link to my YouTube channel as well. That's where all the free stuff is. But if you want kind of any bespoke resources, or if you want consultancy services, you can just email hello@resourcevol.com. But yeah, of course, I'll share a link to everything afterwards. Okay, so I think that there are no more questions now, so I'm going to hand back over to Georgia. Hopefully, if Georgia is there.
I am here. Thank you very much, Nicola. That was really, really interesting, and a really good opportunity to have a deeper think and do some of the tasks and get into the breakout rooms and have some conversations, which is fantastic. If we could have the presentation back up, please, Stephen. I know we're running a little bit ahead now, so a few people had some tech issues at the beginning of the presentation. So I'm just going to recap what I said about the power theme in the Vision for Volunteering, and then we'll go to a break. If you didn't miss this, then do feel free to go to your break a little bit early. Go and stretch your legs, stretch your eyes. And then I'm just going to whistle stop through this, and then we'll take a little bit of a break, and then come back for our next speaker. So power is one of the 5 themes that we came up with during the research that we did to create the Vision for Volunteering, identifying some of the gaps in the volunteering space, and how we can improve those areas. So power essentially is where we want a future where the power of volunteers and communities is not only recognised, but given the support and the foundations that it needs. Every day, volunteers make things happen. People come together in movements of support and action and solidarity and protest. And many organisations and charities and institutions were formed by volunteers initially. We believe that to create thriving communities, we need power to be devolved. So from the state to communities, or organisations to individuals. The Vision for Volunteering is trying to create that future where people who volunteer, who want to shape their communities, have that opportunity. They have the opportunity to shape their volunteering, to share power, and to lead change, and are given those opportunities. We want volunteers and the communities they serve to have power. We want them to become leaders and be leaders. So by the end of our initial 10-year project, so by 2032, we want everyone to be able to engage within their community and to build the future that they want. We want decisions to be made by those who are best placed to make them, and not necessarily by hierarchy. We want people working alongside volunteers to be accountable to their communities and not just to the government or to their funders. We want to recognise who's missing in those volunteering spaces and have the confidence to rectify that. And so how will this feel for those volunteers? So during our research, we got some really great quotes from some of the volunteers that we interviewed. And these were some of the quotes that we got that really, really resonated in that power space. So I have the power to shape my community and to influence what's happening around me. And also this one I think is really powerful. Things are done with, not to me. So really involving volunteers at every step. I'm listened to, I'm respected, and my views are properly taken into account. So we do have a little bit of time if anyone had any questions on that. I know we had the Slido polls initially. We looked at sort of how you feel you're doing in the power space at the moment, how your volunteers think you're doing, what you think you could do better, and what barriers there are to that, and what you think you're doing really, really well as well. And we did get some really great answers. If anybody wants to share anything extra on those questions in the chat, please do. But in the meantime, we're going to take a little bit of a break. We've got a little bit of extra time, so we'll take a bit of a longer break. We'll take 15 minutes here. If people just want to, or if anyone has any questions, we'll do those first. So if you do have questions, please drop them into the chat. And then when we finish doing any questions or any feedback, then we will move into our break, and you can go make yourself a cup of tea and do whatever it is you need to do. And we'll come back here for, what time should we say? Probably about 5 to 12, if that's all right with everybody. So that's quite a long break. But if everyone's comfortable with that, maybe we'll say 10 to 12. Yeah, we'll say 10 to 12. We'll come back into the room, and then we'll have a quick intro, and then we'll move on to our iWill ambassador talk, which I'm really, really looking forward to, and I'm sure you will all enjoy. So I'm just going to skip through. Oops. To our break, and I shall see you shortly unless there are any questions. I'm just going to head over to my chat, see if there's anything pressing. Just to answer you, Caroline, the word clouds came from Slido. We can reactivate the Slido if anybody wants to, but I think most of you did get a chance to answer those. But yeah, if we come back here for 11:50, and I shall see you then. So have a great break, and I shall see you shortly. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to come back for your break. Hopefully you're all nice and refreshed and you've had a good break from your screens and stretched your legs and had a drink and are feeling nice and comfortable for our next speakers. Stephen, if I could just have my next slide quickly. Fabulous, thank you. So our next speakers are coming to us from iWill, which is a fantastic youth social action movement. So these are some of the youth ambassadors from iWill. So we have Zizi Sohawan, Mabruka Agbabiaka, Joba Chowdhury, and Bill Curtis. Bill is not able to join us live today, so he's pre-recorded his section. I'm now going to hand over to them to talk to you about the power of youth social action. Thank you.
Hello, it's iWill Ambassador Bill Curtis here, talking about my social action journey so far. So it all started when I went to a conference. This conference was about secondary school and different aspects about secondary school. But this conference notably was hosted by my local youth cabinet. So if you don't know what youth cabinet is, they're across the country locally, focusing on local matters for young people. After this conference, I decided to join Trafford Youth Cabinet, which was the cabinet who hosted it, like I've just said. And from there, when I was involved with them for a few months, the Member of Youth Parliament elections came up. So I decided I put my name in for that. I made a video, made a campaign for that, and I got elected onto got elected into Youth Parliament. So that was a bit of a shock for me. I didn't know if I was actually going to win or not. From there, I started going to different conferences around the UK. So, for example, Youth Focus Northwest had a partnership with the Youth Cabinet and the Youth Parliament across the Northwest. So I attended conferences and that. We talked about a lot of issues affecting young people. So, for example, votes at 16 or period poverty, and there was a load of different campaigns I was involved with whilst I was a member of Youth Parliament. But something I'm most proud of when I was the MYP for Trafford was speaking in the House of Commons, and here is a short clip around that.
My name is Billy Curtis and I'm the MYP for Trafford. Education plays an important role in everyone's life. Education enhances human knowledge. Education is a weapon that can turn your weaknesses into strengths. But we need to modernise the education system. I believe the majority of lessons in high school should be completely adapted, swapping pens and papers to computers and old-fashioned ways to our new way of life. To bring the education system into the 21st century, we have to use the greatest weapon we have, our voice.
So I spoke, as you just heard then, about the importance of education and modernisation of our education system, which is something I'm really passionate about, because nowadays people don't write in offices on pens and papers. It's all about documents on a computer or on a monitor, which is, well, basically just behind me. So it's vital that we change our education system to suit our modern world, basically. I was actually talking about that the other week in a Future Forum meeting, which is something UK Youth also does, which I'm also a part of. So speaking in the House of Commons and going to conferences and being on video calls every week or so was a really great time. After my term ended as being the Member of Youth Parliament, I was looking for something else to do. I mean, now I've just gone out of this organisation which I spent a lot of my time in. I thought, what can I do with all this new free time? But I noticed that we're looking for 50 new ambassadors, so I put my name down for that, and I thought, if I don't get it, I don't get it, but if I do, I do. And I basically got the ambassadorship, and I've been on some amazing events with iWill. So, for example, the Conservative Party conference. So here are a few clips from the Conservative Party conference.
As the overarching thing, to raise the ambition of young people.
Well, I've always been interested in politics since I can remember. If you want to make things better, if you want to change things, politics is a great way of doing it. Not the only way, but a very, very good way of doing it. So if you are interested in getting involved in politics, throw yourself.
So I thought some things weren't very well run in this country when I got involved in politics as a young person back in the 1980s and 1990s.
And how can more young people get into politics?
I think get involved in the Conservative Party.
Thatcherism, which was the Conservatives, and the Labour Party with Michael Foot, which was very much socialist. So there was a real clear choice, and I made my choice, and that was Thatcherism, not hard left, almost Marxism.
So you're probably wondering why was I interviewing a load of different people. That's because I have my own radio show and I would write for a regional and local newspaper in the Northwest and in Manchester. So I interviewed Nigel Farage, as you've just seen there, James Cleverly, Mims Davies, a load of different MPs, all from the Conservative Party, a few ministers. I met the Children's Commissioner, but most importantly, I hosted a panel with iWill about the outdoor learning policy report they did last year. So on that, we had Robin Miller, who is an MP, who talked from that panel, a few people from Scouts, and a load of great influential people who were watching it. So I think that is an important part of it. But with iWill, I've also been involved with the iWill Week, so that was good fun, hosting events for them. But my youth social action journey hasn't been what I expected, but it's been great.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for coming along today. My name is Zizi, I'm another iWill ambassador. I think Bill's social action journey was amazing, and yeah, really looking forward to explaining to everybody my own social action journey. So like I said, I'm an iWill ambassador. I'm also a care leaver and autistic. I was awarded with an Innovate UK award in 2022 to 2023. I'm a TEDx speaker and published author. Throughout my social action journey, I've managed to accumulate a number of awards, such as the Points of Light Parliamentary Award, the Diana Award, and now I'm a CEO of my own youth mental health and autism charity, which was set up to help other autistic young people just like me. I put down my Twitter and Instagram and just wanted to let you know that I will be talking about some tricky topics. So I put a trigger warning on there, which I think is blocked, but it just says trigger warning, kind of self-harm and things. Next slide, please. So my social action journey. So it all started with my own lived experience. So I had lived experience of secure inpatient CAMS over 4 years. So CAMS is Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services, and I was in secure inpatient units from the ages of 14 to 18. I'm also a care leaver, so I was in care for some time when I was younger as well. My diagnosis was autism, psychosis, and complex trauma, which some people call personality disorder. I had adverse childhood experiences. I was in care, but I was kind of booted out my residential home because they couldn't manage me. I was really kind of struggling. There was a lot of adversity that I faced. You can see the number of attempts that I made over those years kind of on my life. So it got really, really serious. And there were times where I'd be restrained by the police for an hour and a half at a time. I think the message that I'm trying to convey is that I felt incredibly disempowered. I felt like it was the lowest low that I'd ever felt. I remember when I was, I think 15, I was being restrained by the police, and I just kind of was thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the lowest that I've ever been. I just want to get out of this situation. It was really challenging, and like I said, disempowering. Next slide, please. So then this is where my social action journey actually started. When I was 18 or 17, I decided that I wanted to get better. I was in one of the most secure units in the country. I was actually in Wales when I'm based in Birmingham, and I decided that I wanted to get better. I wanted to choose recovery, and I wanted to make something of myself. So I began long-term therapy in the inpatient unit. I started to work towards my education. I was the only young person on the ward who would go up to the education building on site. And it was it was I was the only one who was doing my GCSEs and working towards it. I worked my way to try and make sure that I could transition to a less secure unit before I was discharged, so that I could get used to real life. At this point, I wasn't used to using metal cutlery. I wasn't used to using proper crockery. I was really institutionalized, so I decided that I wanted to stop that. So then 18, I moved to this less secure unit. I started engaging with co-production boards, so mental health co-production boards within integrated care boards within the NHS kind of England system. I was still an inpatient, but I began lecturing at universities about my experiences of being in care for the social work degree course, for mental health nursing courses, and I'd get taxis to and from the hospital. I actually racked up a pretty big fine of from the hospital of keep going to all my different meetings, but I really enjoyed it, and it was really empowering for me. I helped raise £1 million for a mental health charity. The charity that I've set up now has touched the lives of 21,000 people. I've campaigned about the Mental Health Act at 10 Downing Street to make sure that autistic people are no longer sectioned just for being autistic. And like I said, set up my own charity. Part of the work that I've done is I've gone to the International Association for Youth Mental Health, which was based in Copenhagen last year, and spoke in front of 700 people and the Crown Princess of Denmark. So it was a really, really big kind of initiative, and really pivotal in my journey. And I guess the kind of next slide, by the way. And yeah, I think the part of that was that I was made to feel so disempowered throughout all the institutions that I had been in. But social action for me, and doing all of this mental health advocacy work, was about life giving me back that power. It was about making myself feel like I could make a difference to others, and that my lived experience could be used not as a weakness or as something that is a barrier to accessing a life worth living, but actually using my lived experience as something to catalyze into meaningful change in the world around me. I wanted to use it as a tool for good as opposed to a reminder of the bad times. Power played a really big part in my journey, and I remember a youth worker who I worked with when I was still in inpatient, and he was helping me find opportunities to get involved in youth mental health co-production. And his name was Bob. And I remember that even when I was having down moments, when I was struggling in my recovery, he showed me that he cared and that I mattered. He was what you might call a trusted adult. And he was that power catalyst for me. He was the person who kind of showed me that I had a voice and a choice in my life. I think often when you've had quite severe trauma, you feel like you have no voice and no choice. But social action was giving me back my voice and choice in what I wanted to change about the world around me. And Bob helped to empower me. So yeah, I think that's my presentation. And I think the last thing that I want to leave you with is a bit of a call to action, which is be like Bob. Be that trusted youth worker, be that person who's that power catalyst, who enables and empowers young people to make a difference. Thank you everybody for listening to me.
Ooh. Hello everyone. It feels a bit weird just to talk to myself, but nice to meet you. And Zizi, thank you so much for sharing your voice and your lived experiences. It has been very, very inspiring, and I hope to be able to inspire other people with my own story. Can you guys all hear me okay? Just to double check. Yeah, perfect. So, hi, my name is Joba. I go by she, her pronouns. I am also iWill ambassador. I am currently studying at King's College London. I'm a medical student, and that's why I have a stethoscope on my PowerPoint, just like every other medic. That's like my new personal personality. I am from Manchester, and I miss it. Like today I was making my cup of coffee and I saw Limescale. Like as much as I am enjoying my life at London, I miss the nice clean water in Manchester. But yeah, for me, I have always tried to work with other young people because I feel like it's the best way for me to learn about others, but also learn about myself. It has really helped me improve me and my vision for the future. I used to work at a youth club during my 2 gap years that I've taken before medical school, and they were a very difficult time for me, just because I didn't think I could get into medical school. I was really losing myself and my motivation to study the subject I'm really passionate about. But I was working with amazing youth workers, and I had the support of my parents, who made sure that I was keeping on top of my mental health, making sure that I knew that even though times were tough at this point, I could power through. And I have powered through. Now I am doing what I love, and I get to talk to other people about the difficulties when it comes to being a young person, going into further education, especially since I was the first person in my family to access further education. I didn't have prior knowledge, and so being around people that believed in me, such as the youth workers that I was working with, was a great way for me to keep motivated and to see the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess. Also, something else that has really inspired me and showcases how important having young people in voices of power is, something that I've done recently. I've been working with the Young Game Changer Fund, and they have showed me how important letting young people communicate about their ideas is, and giving them that toolkit to be able to access these portals, these helps. It's because, like I said, I initially didn't have that help, but now having that voice and being able to help these other young people is very inspirational, and seeing that there are other young people who care has helped me a long way as well. Like, seeing that other people want to make the same change, want to strive for a better future, does help me work a lot harder. And I think, for example, with the Young Game Changer Fund, the young people were the voice and the power of making the program, and then we were helping other young people apply to this funding, because unfortunately, as much as we would like to say that the volunteering sector is accessible to everyone, it isn't. Money, like always, is involved, as it does help with the running of youth clubs, charities, and obviously for us to have that safe haven, it's important for us to give the money to those places that really need it. So being able to work with these young people that had very similar lived experiences as me and great ideas has helped us give power to these other young people who had amazing ideas, who came to us for funding, and just seeing them work so hard for a vision was great, because a lot of adults do keep saying, oh, young people don't know what they want to do, they don't have passions, but it's just we don't have the toolkits to access those. And I think for me, my helpers, just like Zizi said, be like Bob, were the youth workers that I was working with and my parents. So I think it's very important that we do help other young people find that safe haven, be like the people that they can come up to, because starting that conversation is difficult, especially if it comes to something that's so personal to you. But when you do make those first steps, I think it allows other people to help you out. And for young people, that can be very difficult. So I think I would encourage any adult in the call right now to talk to the youth that you're working with, make sure you are engaging with them and give them the space to speak freely, because a lot of the times when young people are in position of talking about themselves, talking about what they want, there is obviously the adult that's looking out for like running the project, but which is essentially good, because you want someone to make sure that everything is going well. But the fact that young people are not given enough power to talk about what they want to talk about can be a great barrier. So I think be like Bob and make sure that you do not let those barriers stop your young people from achieving what they want, because the youth, as we know, are the future of our generation. They can be the future doctors, actors, youth voices, youth workers. I think it's very important that we do empower them and that we continue working hard to make sure that they have the toolkits that I didn't have, that I ended up looking out for and reaching out for. So let's make that journey for them easier. So yeah, that's my part. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Hi everyone. My name is Mabruka. Could I have? Um, my name is Mabruka. I'm 14 years old, and I'm Nigerian. Turns out it's not actually ethnicity, nationality. I'm Nigerian, and I'm from South Yorkshire, and I like to bake and sew, and I'm aiming to steer my social action to be fighting/tackling racism and Islamophobia, and trying to make the world equal for everyone. Next slide, please. So I'm going to be talking about the times where I felt powerless, but I think it would be right for me to actually explain to you what power means to me. And power means to me to be able to have a say and to be able to have my own control in my life. And one of the few times I felt powerless is when my ideas haven't been taken seriously by my school. I'm a part of a lot of councils and groups in my school, but every time we have an idea, a lot of the time it does get shut down, which makes me feel like I'm not actually able to have a say in my own school. And next one, when I feel like my age is stopping me from making a difference. Because I'm 14, I guess I am considered quite young. It limits me from being able to take up opportunities, like social action opportunities, and also the fact that I'm still in school, I'm not able to do stuff a lot of the time when I'm in school, even though I'm doing this right now when it's school time, and which also makes me feel like I'm not able to contribute as much as I'd like to. And being a minority in a predominantly white school where racist jokes were normalized. So in my school, it's very predominantly white. In my 365-year group, I am the only dark-skinned girl, and I'm the only hijabi, which makes it quite harsh for me. And especially when there are racist jokes going around, I feel like I'm not able to act the way I want to, because I feel like I would want to be able to stand up, but because I feel so overpowered, can't be able to stand up for what's right. And then lastly, suffering from anxiety. That also links to the last point. I've been suffering from anxiety for 2 years now, but luckily now I have gotten better and found many ways to cope with it. But when I do struggle with my anxiety, I feel like I'm not able to control my emotions. I don't have control of my own, mind, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. But how I gained my power back. I decided last year that I was going to take control, and I did that by joining the iWill movement in June 2023. And I was able to have the opportunity to make my own workshop during iWill Week, creating how to stop barriers to youth social action, and I had my own segment about encouraging minorities to partake in social action and how to help adults and youth workers help encourage minorities to partake in youth social action. And I am part of my local youth cabinet, which I actually joined before the iWill movement, and I found the iWill movement through it, which I joined in April. I'm currently the chair, which is quite amazing, which I never thought I would have the confidence to do that. I have been able to meet a lot of new people through youth cons like Bill, youth conferences, and been able to make a difference in my town. I'm also part of my South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, and in January, or last month, I was able to chair a meeting with the South Yorkshire Mayor, Oliver Coppard, which was the first time I actually chaired something like that. And some other things I've done which are not on the slide is I'm part of a partnership board for Children's Capital of Culture, as Rotherham will be the first World Children's Capital of Culture in 2025. So I've been on the board, being able to help make decisions for the event, which is happening next year. And also in December, I was able to present my school leadership about the Power of Youth Charter, which I'll be talking about later, to encourage them to help youth social action in my school. And that's really helped me feel like I have control of my life and be able to have a say as I'm actively going to partake in these opportunities. And then next, fighting for equality. Like I said before, feeling like I've been I don't know if you heard that, but that was my bell. Like I was saying, yeah, so I felt overpowered by being the only minority in my year group. So I have decided to start focusing on fighting for equality as well. So last Thursday was actually World Hijab Day, and I created a blog about my experiences of wearing the hijab, which luckily went around quite a lot. And the official World Hijab Day Twitter account reposted my work, and loads of people were sending my mum, who helped spread it around, telling me that I had encouraged their daughters to wear their hijab for World Hijab Day, and also encouraged a non-Muslim to actually wear the hijab twice a month. My on the photo there, in the middle, is actually a quote from my actual blog, which says, "It's okay to be curious and to ask questions, but it's never okay to make someone feel bad about doing something that they want to do," which I feel like is really important for when it comes to helping other people gain their power. Because when I first started wearing the hijab, I felt worried because a lot of the time people just assume that I'm oppressed and being forced to wear it, and will make comments and make me feel bad, which has made me feel like I haven't had any power. But my next point is being able to see the differences I've made, and I have been able to see the differences, luckily now, 1 year properly starting my social action, the differences I've been able to make. I've actually been able to encourage my school to start making young people have a say in our decisions. For example, I was also part of a student interview panel for a new assistant head teacher with the other couple of students, which has never happened before. And lastly, getting support for my mental health. It's made me feel empowered, as I am able to have control over my mind now, and being able to get this support has helped me be able to start doing all of these social action opportunities. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to join all of these opportunities. Thank you for listening, and we'll be passing back to Zizi.
Hi everybody, I'm back. So right now we're going to be doing let me just see if you can hear me. Right now we're going to be doing an exercise on power. So I'd urge you to get out a pen and paper if you've got any lying around next to you. So we're just going to do this exercise. So what I'd like to do is for you to get your pen and paper, and in the middle center of the page, I want you to draw 3 circles. I know there's loads more circles on the picture, but if you just draw 3 circles, make them big enough so that you can write down people's names in there. So yeah, if you have a go at that, I'll just give you some time to do that. So you've got your 3 circles, and in the inner circle, I want you to write down your anchors. So what I mean by an anchor is people who you need in your life to function. People who, if they weren't in your life, you couldn't live without them. Like you need this person in your life to be able to live the way that you want to, and to live that life worth living. So anchors are people that are necessary and compulsory, mandatory to allowing you to function. So that's your anchor. So if you write down, for example, your mum, so for me, my anchor would be my foster mum, Tamara. So I would put Tamara down, and yeah. It could be someone who's super, super close to you, your best friend, your mum, your dad, your siblings, a close family member who you speak to all the time. So that's your anchors, and that would go in the inner circle, the innermost circle. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to finish writing down your anchors. You can literally just put mum, dad, or you could just put their names, either one. But as long as you put maybe write all your anchors down. And usually anchors are not that many people. It might be only like 3 or 4 people who you see every day and speak to every day. It could be your partner, husband, wife, anything. So yeah, so that's your anchors. Give you some time to write that down. And then in the next biggest circle, so what would be the middle circle, I want you to write down your supporters. So those are people who aren't quite your anchors. You know, you're close to them, they help you, but you don't need them in your life every single day. So that would be maybe someone that you know at work, a colleague. That could be someone who is like a family friend, but you don't see them every day. So yeah, supporters are people who aren't anchors, but they're not strangers either. You know them fairly well. You might see them often, but they're not absolutely mandatory for you to be able to function. So supporters. So if you have a go at writing down your supporters, and I'll just give you a minute to do that. So you've got your supporters, so you've got your anchors, you've got your supporters. Next, I'd like you to write down your acquaintances. So these are strangers, people who you might see, but you don't really know them. So that could be like the bus driver. You might see them every day when you go to work or go to school, college, whatever, for younger people, but you don't know them. You don't know them by name. You just know their face. That's an acquaintance. So it could be somebody else. It could be someone who works in domestics, who you don't really know their names. So if you just pop in their kind of roles, you might not know the names of your acquaintances, but if you just put like their role or something that would remind you of them, and initials even, or you could just put bus driver. It could be a taxi driver. It could be a teacher that you don't really speak to, or sorry, I'm making them very young people centered when I know this isn't mainly for young people. But yeah, I think maybe one of your bosses, but like your boss's boss, so you don't know them very well. So those would be acquaintances. So at the moment, you've got 3 circles. You've got your anchors, you've got the supporters, and then you've got the acquaintances. So now I'd like you to look at your page. Next slide, please. So you've got your anchors, you've got your supporters, and you've got your acquaintances. Now I'd like you to look at how many names you've got in those circles. Do you have a lot for anchors? Do you have few for acquaintances, or do you have a lot for supporters? What do your circles look like? And going on to the theme of power, I would the reason why I've kind of brought up this exercise is to say that young people who are in this day and age, we find it a lot more difficult to find anchors. With the COVID-19 pandemic, it highlighted disparities in society, particularly around the cost of living crisis and financial distress. Mental health was a really big thing that came out from the pandemic. Social skills have pretty much been depleted since the pandemic. Everything's online. I think all those factors together mean that it's much harder for young people to find an anchor. And when you don't have an anchor, you don't have as much power, and you have less confidence in yourselves. You feel disempowered. And part of this is that youth who feel powerless often have maybe quite a few acquaintances, few supporters, and even fewer anchors. It's really difficult for young people in today's climate to find anchors, and not having an anchor can make a young person. I know for me, it made me feel like, because I only had people who were paid to look after me, even my youth worker, I guess, is paid to look after me, but like being in care, you don't have many people who are your anchors without being paid. And so I think it's important for you, all who are listening, to be an anchor for someone. But yeah, if anybody wants to volunteer to answer that question about what I just said, but yeah, I think that the message I'm trying to give is similar to the Be Like Bob, in that be a young person's anchor. What can you do today to be a young person's anchor or supporter, or close supporter, so that you can help young people reclaim that power back? I don't know if anybody wants to answer that. So what can you do to be someone's anchor? A young person's anchor. That's okay. We're a quiet group. But yeah, but if anybody answers in the chat, please do let me know. But yeah, I think that's the end of the interactive activity, and just wanted to leave you with that message of being a young person's anchor and be like Bob. That's the call to action. So yeah, listen. That's right, Claudia. Listen is a really big part. Active listening, and listening to understand rather than listening to respond. Often in today's society, we're reactive instead of proactive to young people's needs. So maybe offering, yeah, that's right, Laura, offer support. Listening to understand a young person's experiences rather than listening to automatically be reactive and responding to what they're going through. So I guess the key message is think about how you can be a trusted adult to a young person by being their anchor, and hashtag Be Like Bob. But yeah, I've got some great things in the chat. Be consistent. I spend time listening, talking, guiding, and telling tales from my own youth. Hold distress and hold a young person's emotional and relational safety. Definitely. But, thank you everybody for participating in that exercise.
It's back to me. Thank you so much to everybody from iWill that gave some really empowering and really incredible stories just then. We do have some time for questions. So if anybody does have any questions for any of the ambassadors specifically, or all of them as a whole, please do drop them into the chat. I'll just give you a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes to write any questions in the chat. I believe we already have one. So I'm just going to find that now. So are there any local iWill ambassador initiatives? Just wondered for my local area, from Laura. So Zizi, did you want to take that question?
Yeah, so iWill works across the kind of all over England and I think Scotland. And so it's kind of not just necessarily regional and local. It operates on a much bigger scale. And so I guess if you wanted to get in touch about iWill ambassador initiatives, I'd say that the first step would be to sign the Power of Youth Charter, and then get in touch with the iWill team about if there's any young people that who may want to be iWill ambassadors. I believe that every kind of summer, maybe August time, there's new iWill ambassadors, but I'll hand over to Joe Bryn Mabruka for a bit more information.
Yeah, so I think the application time is around, it starts like in May. and ends in June. And then if you go through, there's an interviewing stage, but you find out around June. And there's often a residential in August where you get to meet other iWill ambassadors.
Yeah, the process is actually quite simple. Like, it's not scary at all. You just talk about yourself fill out a form, and then you get called into interviews. They're not interviews where you're like with a person, just like one-to-one scary. It's nothing like that. It's in a group. They're just trying to get to know you better and see how you would work with different groups of young people, because it's very important to see if you can mingle with different ideas, different young people, just because young people are so diverse, and knowing how to handle and be able to talk to everyone is very important. So the process is simple, and if you are willing to apply, I say apply, and maybe next year you could be doing this talk.
Fabulous, thank you all. I think we have another question. So this was from Daksha asking, is there a moment in your journey that stands out as the key to realizing you have power? So I think it'd be really great if we went around and had each of you answer this individually. So I don't know, Mabruka, do you want to go first?
I think for me, when I started to realize I had power, it was probably after I was able to get mental health support for my anxiety, and was able to actually be confident and join these social action opportunities. And that's when I realized that I actually am able to make a difference in my community.
Amazing, thank you. Zizi, did you want to go next?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a brilliant answer, Mabruka. I think for me, the moment in my journey that stood out as the key to realizing that I had power was when I think it was probably when I went to Copenhagen and spoke in front of those 700 people in the Princess of Denmark. Like, I think it was like standing on the stage, I was so nervous, and I had to hand like a bouquet of flowers to her. And I was supposed to curtsy at the same time because that's the kind of like tradition, and I couldn't do it at the same time because I've got really bad coordination. But I think speaking to her and speaking in front of that audience and talking about the state of mental health services in the UK, that was really empowering for me, and it made me think, wow, like I have made a difference to people, not just in the UK but beyond. And somebody came up to me afterwards and said and said that their lived experience was very similar to mine, and they'd been in inpatient settings and had psychosis too, and that they felt really touched by what I said. And that was a really big moment.
Fantastic. And Jopa?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, for me, I think everything that I have done has been a moment of power. Like this talk, for example, is a realization as well, because every single journey and steps that I've taken makes me realize, like, wow, I'm working towards something that I really enjoy, and also towards helping other young people find their voices. Because I mean, I am still very nervous when it comes to public speaking and just like talking to people, even though it's behind a screen, I still get very nervous. But like being able to do activities like this to push myself out of my comfort zone has been a pivotal point for me to see that I do have the power to make a change, and to stand up for what I believe in. So yeah, I think I like to take in every moment, just appreciate them as it goes. And yeah, thank you two for sharing your powers and stories.
Amazing, thank you all so much. We've just got a couple more questions, both of them for Mabruka. So the first is, you said your age sometimes kept you from taking part in social action. What actions can organisations take to lift the barriers for young people trying to do social action? And that's from Constance.
I think one of the first things that organizations can do probably is, for when such opportunities occur, for them to be after school. So people like my age can actually join them, because a lot of the time I'm very lucky that my school is very like allowing of me to do all of these stuff. Like I'm in school right now doing this, but I know a lot of schools won't be like that. So I think being able to for them to be at a later time so that young people can do it after school and not miss out on their learning, and probably just being able to have a little bit more trust in young people, because I understand that a lot of the time it's just, oh, you're not mature enough, you haven't gone through enough to be able to be mature enough to actually take part in these opportunities. But I can say for a lot of people, we might, because of our experiences, we are quite mature, and to be able to trust us to actually join these opportunities.
Amazing, thank you. And just another question for you. Have you been able to tackle the racism in your school, and how was this done? And that's from Claudia.
Unfortunately, not yet, but it's something that I'm trying to work on. Like slowly, I've joined this local regional ethnic minority youth group for my area, Yorkshire and the Humber, and we've been doing surveys for racism in schools, and I think me being able to join that group is going to help me have the confidence to tackle it, because I think sometimes when it comes to racism, it's quite hard to deal with. If someone doesn't blatantly call you a slur, a lot of the time school might not see it as racist because they haven't called you a slur or not specifically said you're like the slur. So hopefully in the future, like maybe this time next year, I would have been able to deal with a lot of the racism in my school. Thank you for asking.
Amazing, thank you. And then we've got another question that's just open to all of you. And this is from Ellie, and that's, how can we include more people in volunteering? So many charities only recruit over 18s, but they are missing out on potential and commitment. It's often down to insurance and safeguarding policies, which are there to help protect young people. However, they eventually stop their access. So quite a long one, and obviously quite a detailed one as well. But any thoughts on that would be very welcome.
I've got an answer to that. So I'd say that something that I've set up within my charity, and I think should be in every single charity and organisation that there is in the kind of voluntary sector, there should be like you get CEOs, you get kind of head of diversity, you get head of deputy financial, like the financial officers, like all the senior leadership roles that there are in charities. I think there should be a youth role for them. So like if you've got a CEO, have a youth CEO. If you've got a head of I know talent or people, have a youth version of that. If you have an operations manager, have like a one of those. If you've got a head youth worker, have like a youth co-production young person worker. Like I think having a youth role for each single leadership position that there is needs to happen. And I think I know that within charities you have trustee roles, and they're really good initiatives, but you have to be over 18 to be a trustee. And so I think maybe there's something around having like trustee training that is given to under 18, so that when young people do turn 18, then they're able to get involved that way. But I know that there's like additional insurance and different legislation and safeguarding laws that mean that young people need to be 18 and over to engage in these things, but actually that's a real barrier. And so I think having voluntary roles for young people in organisations that is like a youth specific role, I think would be able to kind of get around that barrier. So yeah, that's my answer.
Great, thank you. I don't know if either of you had anything to add.
Yeah, I really liked what Zizi just said, because I do think it's very important to have these roles for young people. And I think if we pair them with, for example, another youth worker, they can learn from them. So they can be their anchor. They can follow them, see how they work, and take on those responsibilities maybe in the future and be the role model for the younger people for the future. So I think it's just like a follow through, like let everyone have the chance to do the jobs. And if maybe have like open days where you have young people from the local schools come in, try out different roles within your charity organization, see what they might enjoy, they might stick around for the future. And I think that also taps in to like how we can recruit more people into volunteering, because schools can be a great way to advertise it and make sure that young people can easily access these opportunities, especially because schools can also deal with the safeguarding issues as well. So if that's something that your charity organization is finding quite difficult, tapping into these local resources that are already there and asking them for help can be a great way to tackle the law side of things, but also have more young people in your organization and be more youth-led.
Incredible. Thank you so much. I think we've just got one more question, which is from Kish, which is, what would you say is the best way to recruit young volunteers, and where should organizations advertise and how?
Can I go first? Or yeah, okay. So I think this goes back to what I was saying about tapping into local resources. But I mean, nowadays in the age of media and social media, that's like a great way to access people very quickly. Like I know, for example, for someone who wanted to get into medicine, it was very important for me to have a lot of work experience, work around different young people. So maybe even advertising it to young people who have very niche fields that they want to go into in the future can be a way to like get them involved. Just because like I looked for a lot of volunteering places and I've looked around to see who I could help, just so I could understand better if working with people was like the career path I wanted to go into, just because with medicine it's like so people focused as well. So yeah, I think advertising it on social media, making sure it's readily available to as many young people, maybe even focusing it on people who have niche interests, can be a good way to advertise it and make sure that more people can tap into your roles and opportunities that you might have in your organization and charity.
Could I go next?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Joba just said. Using social media is a great way to get young people. A lot of stuff that I've applied to, I found out from like Instagram, for example, like Youth Social Action Instagram pages, which has been quite useful to find, especially if it's like a regional level, and possibly already like youth social action groups already that are already happening, because there'll be people already there that are actively wanting to partake in volunteering. So if you're able to go for like local youth cabinets who already like do these kind of stuff already, it'll be a lot easier to get them as they want to do it already.
Definitely completely echo what Joba and Mabruka have said. I think social media, particularly Instagram, is really good for being able to access a wide range of young people. I'd even suggest maybe going to an iWill ambassador or a social action youth kind of leader in their field. So someone who's got a somewhat large following who does social action, maybe speaking to them and getting them to advertise your opportunity to volunteer, so that you've got people who are in positions of power or influence in youth social action to showcase your opportunity. But also schools, I would say, is a really big one, which is also what Joba said. But I think, yeah, schools are really big because is usually for under 18 school is where you find all the opportunities for anything, because school is your life. So I think, yeah, definitely school and social media are the best ways.
Incredible. Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you again to all of you, and also to Bill, who couldn't join us live, for coming along today and for sharing your incredible stories. Really, really inspiring. Thank you so much. I'm just going to kick off with the close. Just if I could have my slides again, please, Stephen, and we'll just go through the last few bits. I think we've got about 15 minutes left, so fantastic. Thank you. So just to round off then, thank you so much for coming today, and I hope you really got something out of it and had some good discussions in your breakout rooms, and enjoyed the speakers that we had along today. There is a feedback form for the event that Stephen will share in the chat shortly. So if you can just go along and let us know what you thought of the event and how we could do better in future, and what you thought of the speakers, etc. That's really valuable to us because it helps us to produce future events and make them even better. We do have a toolkit available on our Vision for Volunteering website. So if you want to talk about the vision yourself and share it in your own communities and in your own organizations, we've developed a toolkit that you can download for free, and give presentations or give talks, or get stakeholder buy-in for the Vision for Volunteering. We also have our Vision Champions scheme. So if you feel really passionately about the vision and about changing volunteering and the landscape of volunteering, you can sign up as a Vision Champion. This is to help build the movement, help to create a better future for volunteering, and you can sort of participate as much or as little as you'd like to. It's open to anyone involved in volunteering. So if that's something that interests you, there's more information about that on our website. You can read a bit more about it, and fill out the form and apply. You can sign up to our mailing list. You can follow us along on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, or you can drop us an email if you've got any feedback from today, or if you've got any questions about the vision, and you want to get more involved, anything at all, please do. The inbox is constantly manned. We're very responsive, so please do talk to us on socials or via email. And finally, if you want to find out more about the vision, then sign up to more of our events or go along to visionforvolunteering.org.uk. Please do fill out that feedback form. I think we've got some time now. So if you wanted to have a click on the link and fill that out now, then please do. And just finally, if there are any questions at all for me about the vision specifically, then please do drop those in the chat, and we'll take a few minutes to answer those now. I'll just give you a couple of minutes in case there's any questions in the chat. And if not, then I hope you have a fantastic rest of your Wednesday. We do have some more of these. They are sold out, but there are spaces coming up regularly. So if anyone drops out, you can get on the waiting list for those. We've got collaboration coming up next week, and then the agenda for all of these will be announced in the coming days as well. We have experimentation coming up on the 28th of February, and also the 7th of March we've got our Equity and Inclusion Conference, and there will be a similar format to this with some really fantastic speakers. So thank you again so much for coming along, and I hope to see you all at a session soon.